Hi everyone! So lately I've been kind of enjoying that very nostalgic sort of late 90s, early 2000s Kidcore aesthetic, and I figured what better build to use it on than a miniature playroom. We are back in one of my shelving units for today's room. Not the Kallax, the wider one. I did end up having to dismantle my little hobbit bedroom setup, but I think this is just the best space for what I have planned. While we're on the subject of the hobbit room, I'm running very low on foam board sheets, and if you watched that video, you'll have seen that I used 2 for the side walls and 1 to cover up the kind of unsightly back panel of the shelf. And since they are already cut to size and everything, I think it would be wasteful not to try and reuse the ones I used for the side walls. I can't reuse the one for the back wall because I cut a massive hobbit window into it. But I think if I flip the side wall ones over to the back, I can just get away with covering them in some coloured paper. I'm basing this whole playroom around like primary colours, so I think I'm going to pick 1 for each wall. As for the paper I'm going to be covering them with, I found an old pack of like file folders that we don't need, and they happen to be in some pretty perfect primary shades. The only one I'm not 100% sold on is the blue, purely because in a lot of my reference images for this kind of 90s Crayola Kidcore look, it seems to be a darker shade of blue. However, the only other blue paper that I have enough of to cover a wall is quite significantly darker, and I'm worried it's going to detract a little bit from the otherwise very colourful room. However, looking at it next to the others, I do kind of prefer it. I personally do tend to gravitate towards darker colours anyway though, so yeah, I'm not entirely sure on the blue wall yet. Maybe I'll save that for the back wall since I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do in regards for covering that yet. So I think for now I'll just focus on covering the side walls in red and yellow. This is a really good shade of red, by the way. My camera's just like really making it look orange right now. Maybe if I change my light settings. Okay, now I have both of my side walls covered. I did have to use 2 pieces of paper to cover the full width, so there is kind of a visible seam, which I'm not really enjoying. However, you know, we do kind of have to make do and mend on this channel, so I think it will just have to do. For the back wall, I've ended up just sort of cobbling together this sheet of cardboard from some scrap pieces that I had, and that should theoretically fit all the way along that back wall. And I have finally settled on the darker blue paper to cover this with, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Once that's done, I can just slide it into the back of the shelf. Add in the side walls. Then to cover the floor, I've got another piece of that vinyl offcut stuff that I've used in the past. And I've also cut some 1/2-inch wide strips of card to stick along the bottom of the wall for like baseboards. So those are the bare bones of the room all finished. I will say that the back wall has unfortunately picked up the texture of the cardboard I used. I really tried to avoid that, and it kind of worked on the other side of the wall, but for some reason over here it's just really like wrinkled and stuff. It looks a lot better off camera, but with the ring light on, it's just making it super evident. I'm not quite sure how to hide that. I'm wondering if I just put like a window there. Yeah, that could cover it up quite nicely, so I think I'm gonna try and do that. I printed out this picture of my garden and I did it onto A4 because I was thinking about it and I feel like some sort of glass French doors out to the garden would be a fun thing to have in the playroom. Plus, this way it'll cover up a lot more of the wall imperfections. So I guess now we're going with a glass door instead of a window. Then I've just covered it with a sheet of clear plastic packaging, adding some more of those strips of white card that I used for the skirting boards around the edges. Then, since it's meant to be like a sliding door, I have another sheet of clear plastic that I've also surrounded with the white card strips. And I'm going to stick that over one side of my bigger framed picture to make it look like they're kind of overlapping, if that makes sense. And then I'll just use some double-sided tape to stick the whole thing onto that back wall. And thankfully, that does do a pretty good job at hiding the whole wrinkly paper problem. The clear plastic itself is a little bit rippled, but to be honest, it's pretty useful that that doesn't reflect me super clearly or anything, so I'm gonna just go ahead and call that one a win. As for this side, it is definitely a lot less wrinkled, but you can still see a little bit of bubbling. So I'm going to go ahead and make some wall art to go there. I went online and found a bunch of like classroom resource posters and then just compiled them all onto one page and printed them out. I'm just going to choose a few of them that I think would look nice on that wall and cut them out. And then I'm going to mount them onto a piece of that other blue card that I was debating using, since I figure this way it's kind of like having the best of both worlds, you know? Although, now that I'm looking at it, I wonder if I might need a little bit more contrast around the outside. So I'm going to glue the blue card onto another leftover piece of that red file folder we used for the wall. And then I'm also going to use these like old craft scissors I've had forever to try and add a scalloped edge around the outside. Okay, that's much more what I was going for. The scallops are a little bit wonky because those scissors are surprisingly hard to use. But I'm going to go ahead and stick it to the wall anyway. And with that done, most of the faults in the back wall are covered over now. The tiny little bit of remaining bubbling just underneath that should be obscured by what I'm going to make next, which is basically like a cube shelf type thing. For this, I've cut 3 rectangles of foam board that are 10 inches by 2.5 inches, and then 12 smaller ones that are 2.5 by 2 inches. I also went ahead and wrapped them in some white printer paper to cover any of the visible sides that aren't super neat. And then on the underside of one of my longer foam board rectangles, I'm going to make a mark every 2 inches so that I can place one of my shorter foam rectangles at the very end, and then another on each of those marks all the way along, ending off with another on the farthest end to make 5 little cubby holes. I repeated the process on another of my long rectangles, and then I'll just stack my last remaining foam board piece on top of one of them. And then I've just set down some double-sided tape at all those 2-inch markers, and I'll stack my final set on the top, trying to line them up as accurately as I can before I press it in. And now we have a mini set of cube shelves to go underneath the poster. There are a few little imperfections, but I don't think any of them will be visible once we've filled the shelves up. Before I get into that though, I think I want to make some rugs for the room next. Apologies if you can hear the rain really loudly in the background, but I have drawn up a couple of designs for the 2 rugs I want to put in here. The first is like one of those road map type ones that you can play with toy cars on, and the other is like a snake, and it's segmented into like puzzle pieces. That one's a bit harder to explain, but we're just going to start off with the car one anyway. I'm not entirely sure which fabric to use for these. I had planned on felt, but I only have one piece of felt, and I think it's only big enough for the snake-shaped rug. But I did find this piece of fleece, which is, I guess, a similar sort of felt texture. So I think we're just gonna have to hope that this will take paint decently well. So I've just cut myself out a little square of the fleece, and then I'm going to just use some acrylic paint to try and transfer my design onto the fabric. Okay, this is by no means perfect, and I could definitely just spend forever adding little details and neatening things up. However, this has already taken way longer than I had originally anticipated, so I think I'm just gonna have to call it there. And as for the snake rug, I think I'm gonna end up doing it entirely off camera just to save myself some editing time, in all honesty. So I have cut myself a snake out of the other felt that I had, and I'm just going to repeat the same process, going in with some acrylic paint and replicating my design. And we're back with the fully painted snake rug, which I'm going to put in front of the cube shelf. And then for the little driving map type rug, I just quickly went in and painted the outer edges with some black acrylic to kind of finish it off. And that one is going in front of the doors. Very pleased with how both of those turned out. So now I'm going to try and fill the room up a little bit more since we only have one piece of furniture so far. And the next thing I want to make is a beanbag for this corner over here, so it can be like a little kind of reading setup. For this, I have a spare fluffy sock. It's red, which I think will go well in this corner since we've got the yellow and the blue on this side. It does have some like Christmassy snowflakes on it, but I'm hoping that when it's stuffed, those won't be like super obviously Christmassy, if you know what I mean. So I'm going to start by stuffing the toe end with some polyfill. And then I've added some like weighting glass beads and sand into this little plastic bag I had, just because I don't entirely trust the like weaving on this sock not to leak sand everywhere if I just put it in loose. And I'm just going to put the little bag in with the polyfill and kind of maneuver it around a bit. I kind of want it to be lying sort of flat against the back. This is so that it will sit a bit more naturally like a beanbag would in real life to kind of add some weight to it, you know? And then I'll just top it up with some more stuffing until I have kind of the right size I need. And then I'll cut off some of this excess sock fabric. And then I'm just using some matching red thread to ladder stitch the top closed, or I guess the bottom closed, maybe I should say. And once it's all sealed, I can just kind of manipulate the stuffing a bit until it looks sort of realistic. Now our dolls have a comfy little beanbag to sit in. I also want like a little kiddie table for crafts and whatnot. And I'm hoping I can try and DIY this with some recycled plastic bits that I have. For the legs, I have 4 of these little like plastic bottle cap lids. And then for the top, I have this piece from a fidget cube container. And hopefully, I think if I can remove the labels and everything, I could just sort of set that on top of the bottle caps and we'd have ourselves a little kiddie table. I'm going to start by trying to trim off these like sharp edges on the underside of the tabletop piece. I have managed to get the label off as well, but it did take a fair bit of sanding to remove the residue. Plus, I still have these like printed on logos on the side. So I'm going to go in now and paint over the top of this with some more blue. While that's drying, I'm also going to paint the legs. And I'm going to start out by squirting some paint inside them since they are transparent. And then once the inside is coated, I'll also paint the outside. And that's kind of the equivalent of adding 2 layers of paint without having to wait for one to dry first. Before I can add the legs to my tabletop, I've realised that I need to kind of fill in this empty space so that the legs have something to attach to without sinking down inside. So I'm going to start off by just shoving some scrap cardboard in there to take up some space, then filling the rest with hot glue. I ended up doing 2 of the red ones and 2 of the yellow. I did have a bit of trouble building up enough opacity on the yellow ones, but I think once they are underneath, the shadow of the tabletop will hopefully help hide any of the light that's traveling through it still. I'm just going to use some more hot glue to attach them to the underside of the table, alternating between the red and the yellow for a fun design. So now we have a cute little kiddie-sized activity table. Then our table obviously needs a chair, so I just found this little toy wooden building block and painted it the same shade of blue as the tabletop. And I think it's about the right height to work as like a little stool. I'm gonna put these over in this corner since we have yet to add anything on this side of the room. And I think that's everything that I'm going to be making from scratch in this video. However, I do have a few more bits I need to customize before adding them to the room. The first is this mini Little Tikes play kitchen. Little Tikes had a dollhouse in like the 80s, I think, that came with scaled down versions of a lot of their toys. And some of them are really collectible, so it's like hard to find them. But I found this one secondhand on Vinted for £2, so of course I snapped him up. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do to customize this. I do really like it as it is, but it doesn't exactly match the rest of the decor. I know that's not really the point of a playroom, but you know, just from a design sense, I think I do want to try and make it blend in a little bit better. I'm wondering whether this cream-coloured part would look good in sort of a darker green, and I might just brighten up the blue shade on the top here. The next thing I want to customize is this LOL Surprise Little Tykes car. I found this on Vinted for £1, and I just want to basically repaint it in the kind of classic Little Tykes Cozy Coupe colour scheme. Next, we have this little wooden box that I picked up at the craft store for £1.50, as you can see. And again, I just want to give this like a fun, kidcore, whimsical little paint job to just make it fit the vibe a bit better. Also found these in the same section at the craft store. Again, for £1.50, they're just these little mini wooden houses that I thought could work well as a dollhouse if I painted them up. And I did also really want that like Little Tykes dollhouse whiteboard thing, but I couldn't find one, at least not in decent condition. So instead, I've picked up this little mini easel. And for this, I literally just want to paint like a cute little kiddie art scene onto the canvas, and yeah, I think that'll be good. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to embark on my copious little painting projects here. I also came across this dog toy at my local pet shop, and it's obviously made to look like a space hopper, so I'm going to add this into the room as well. And now I can begin to fill up our cube shelves with lots of mini toys. If you saw my last video, I opened up a Mini Brands advent calendar, and everything that I got was Mini Brands mini toys. Hence why this ended up being the next craft on the list. I know some of you might hate me for this, but I am going to remove a few of them from the packaging just so that they look a bit more realistic in a playroom setup. I also have some toy mini brands that were not from the advent calendar video. I found somebody that was selling all of their doubles for like £2, I think it was. And in that we had the little Disney Animators Anna doll, a Toy Story Jessie doll, a Beast doll, Darth Vader, a little Yoda sippy cup thing, a Minnie Mouse lunchbox, the Death Star, this Mickey Mouse grill set, a Sleeping Beauty, the Ariel animator doll, C-3PO, a Mickey Mouse like remote controlled car, a Minnie Mouse play kitchen, a Spider-Man that had already been removed from the packaging, as well as a few duplicates so I won't feel too bad taking them out of the packaging. On top of that, I was also able to thrift a few of the world's smallest miniatures. I think this whole lot was £1 again, and we have a couple of Hot Wheels, a My Little Pony, this little, I can never remember what these are called, but those like little talking phone things, a He-Man, I think like a light box, and a somewhat overscaled yo-yo. Also this guy, I don't really know what he is. Feel free to inform me down in the comments. Also, very pleased to find that the world's smallest cars come out of their packaging really nicely. So I'm going to set them up on my little map rug thing. Whoa, and I just got He-Man out of the packaging too, and he came with like accessories. That is crazy. Wow, I knew world's smallest were good, but I did not realize they were that good. I think maybe I better put those inside the toy box for safekeeping. I also managed to get these two little mini Beanie Babies for, I think it was £2 on Vinted. I got these quite a while ago. And I also found this little mini Lala Loopsy doll who I thought could sit nicely on my beanbag chair. On my craft store run the other day, I also picked up this little like surprise bag of mini Care Bears. So let's see which of them we got. I don't know the names of the individual Care Bears, but we have a little blue one with a moon on his belly and a purple one with hearts, so let me know who those are down below. Very pleased to add them into the room, whoever they are. And then to finish off, I'm just adding in a few little mini toys that I've just had in my collection for ages. You might have noticed that I never added this, and that's because I realised I have no wall art on the side walls. So I figured instead of leaving it on the easel, I would stick my little canvas to the wall above my activity table area. To fill up some more of this wall space, I have this random thing which I found at the scrap store I've mentioned in the past. I have no idea what it is, but it has like Pokemon and some Marvel characters on it, so I figured I would just cut out a few of these little squares and use them as posters. I also have this little photo card thingy of Stitch that I got from a Disney Dorable, and a few more of those little posters that I printed out before. I also cut out some little rectangles of paper and just drew some, some kiddie drawings on them, and I'll just dot them around in some of those empty wall spaces as well. Last but not least, we finally have the return of the repainted Little Tikes car, and I had great trouble trying to build up the opacity on this yellow part. I accidentally bought the transparent variant of my usual acrylic paint brand, so it took many layers, which is why this is being added so late in the game. And now that it's here, I'm sort of rethinking adding it at all, because it sort of obscures quite a lot of things, no matter where I put it. But it would kind of feel like a bit of a shame to have wasted so much time trying to paint it. So I guess I'm just gonna kind of move it around wherever is best when I'm taking pictures and stuff. That being said, our little playroom diorama is finally done. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would very much appreciate a like and maybe even a subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!